Hello BookTube. Today I'm going to be giving you my non-spoiler review of Lost Causes by Richard Nichols. The story opens with a British Special Forces officer who is operating undercover being killed in the jungles of the Yucatan in Mexico. Due to his death, the highly secret British intelligence agency called the Mill sends its top operative, called John Buchan, to investigate the Special Forces officer's death, and in the process he uncovers a massive plot involving the Provisional IRA and a hurricane called Hannah, which is about to hit the region. Now, I won't go any further into the plot because obviously I don't want to spoil it. Overall, I really enjoyed the book. It's a really well done spy thriller. There's a lot of well done action. The locations are very well described. The location is mainly set in an area of the Yucatan called Meridia, I believe that's how it's pronounced. And the plot is very well structured. Not to spoil anything, but there's a throughout the book you've got the main plot going on with Buck and investigating the special forces officer's death and the terrorists he was undercover with, as well as an event earlier on in Buchan's life, about 10 years earlier, which involves two of the main villains of the terrorist plot, and that's really well done. Now, the book is very much inspired by a number of authors. Noticeably is John Buchan, who obviously gets name checked as the cover name for the main character. The main character's real name is Charlie Hook. I should say that's not a spoiler because that's actually on the back of the book. It's on the blurb on the back of the book. The book also also references Buchan by the way that politics is weaved into the plot, which very much reminded me of Powerhouse, which is I think a Buchan wrote in 1916, I think. The description of the Yucatan and sort of the Mexican landscape very much reminds me of the way that Ian Fleming described Jamaica. I mean, Richard Nichols actually lives in Mexico, and so you can tell very strongly by his descriptions of the landscape and the landscape and the towns and the people that he clearly knows what he's talking about, and you get a real sense of Richard's fondness for Mexico throughout the book. Richard's also able to get across the sort of the general nature of Mexico as well, giving sort of a sense of the area in terms of sort of crime and sort of social elements of society and the way it sort of works with the massive sort of organised crime that you've got in Mexico. Now, I mentioned the politics being weaved in the book. Now, I don't personally have a problem with that. I should say that whilst and that's not only because I sort of am sympathetic to the politics in the book, which I believe is very much politics, is very much Richard's own politics. I should mention that I have had some interaction with Richard Nichols, and so he sort of mentioned stuff to me, and I also did a bit of research in looking into the reviews of the book, and so that's something that is very much at the heart of the book. Now, I say that I enjoyed that part, not because it's my part, not only because I happen to agree with the politics, but it's well done. In the same way that the politics is weaved into the plot of A Very British Coup by Chris Mullin, whose politics are very much not mine, but he was able to interweave the politics in the plot there really well. That they enhance the book, don't detract from it. It doesn't feel clunky in the same way that the politics that appears in this book don't feel clunky. They very much feel a part of the book, a part of the plot. For example, one element of it is the fact that the plot is very much a sort of a fight between civilization represented by John Buchan's character and barbarism and savagery represented by the terrorists, and that's a very strong part of the political message of the book. And it works well because John Buchan's character's motivation for trying to find the killers or the terrorists who killed the British Special Forces officer is because for Buchan, the Special Forces officer represented what he regarded as the best of British. He represented the phrase he uses is the old breed. And so the politics doesn't get in the way of the plot. It very much is a necessary part of the plot, and very much a necessary part of John Buchan's motivation for what he does. Another, which that sort of reminded me in many ways of also Bulldog Drummond by Sapper, where I can see sort of elements of the way that Buchan's described, and that reference to the old breed in Bulldog Drummond. There's a mention that Bulldog Drummond is a member of the breed, and so I think I'm not sure if that's a reference Richard made, but it very much reminded me of that. And this book very much reminded me of Bulldog Drummond in that way, where the character comes across similar to Drummond and sort of his motivations. You can quite imagine Bulldog Drummond doing something like this. So there is also references to Ian Fleming in the naming of brands and weapons, and there's very much definite sort of the stuff that Buchan uses, and that's very well done. It fits because Buchan, these are things, sort of tools of Buchan's trade. There's a very good part in the book. It's a very small part, but it's right at the beginning where you get to see the relationship between the British Special Forces and MI6. And there's this character is called Simon Carrington, who acts as sort of liaison between the Special Forces and MI6. Is portrayed as this deeply sort of oily, is very much oily, untrustworthy, sort of very much the embodiment of New Labour. Imagine a sort of Peter Mandelson, and you get the idea. It very much represents the era. I should say the book is actually set in 2005, so it's very much representative of the way that sort of British government seemed to be governed at the time, and sort of the politicisation of the British intelligence community at the time, which there was a lot of concern of that because of the sort of Doddy dossier and the Iraq War. Look, that comes across really well. There's an interesting character in terms of one of the villains, so I'm not going to go too much into that because it will spoil the plot, but the main sort of villain is very much embodies that sense of barbarism, of being representative of barbarism and savagery, but in a very refined form. He's sort of the embodiment of the sort of intellectual of that sort of form of barbarism and savagery, and he comes across really well as sort of perfect representative of what Buchan is going up against, and also he's one of the people but one of the two villains who Buchan has that grudge against because of something that happens because of that sort of flashback elements to the events about 10 years before. That's what I'm just trying to think if I can think of anything else to mention. Just to say that that's pretty much all I have to say. Other than that, I highly recommend you. If you want a really good spy thriller, there's a contemporary that very much has a sort of political element to it, but which is well done. I can't recommend Lost Causes any higher. Yeah, I can't recommend any more highly. I should say that, yes, one thing I should mention is Richard, as well as being an author, is also a YouTuber. He runs a channel called the Red Pill Fiction Factory, a link to which I'll leave in the description below, where he has interviews with various authors, and including one interview where somebody interviews him about his writing, And so I would highly recommend people go and subscribe to Richard's channel and watch his videos because they're very interesting. He also has a very good interview with a journalist called Tom Burrows. Tom Burrows, who about Ian Fleming and James Bond, the James Bond novels, which is really good. So again, I recommend both the book, which is really good, and Richard's YouTube channel, which is also really good. So with that, BookTube, I'll say goodbye, and I will see you later.